Hey there. Can you hear me? Let me change my name.
Yeah, this is Art. I can hear you fine.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, I hear you. How's it going?
Good. How are you today?
Doing well. Yeah, so this is our CNC call where anybody can just jump in and answer questions, real free form, and help you with any questions that you might have or project ideas, troubleshooting, whatever you want. Yeah, so I'm Drew, by the way, from MakerMade. So what can I help you with?
Well, I watched the video, probably went back about a month, kind of struggling with calibration. I've had this, well, my daughter and I bought this, an M2, back in November. It sat around for a month or two after the holidays and ice fishing and all that. And I've been struggling a little bit with calibration. I think I've, worked through probably the typical bugs of something being off a little bit, and
Okay.
got it in pretty good shape, I think. But I watched one of these from about a month ago, and Casey was on, and I used his videos the last time I set it up.
Awesome. Yeah.
And that worked well. There were a couple things he said, and I was kind of hoping maybe he would be on here today.
There he is.
Hey, there he is.
204-05-8593. It's Casey, apparently.
Well, the comments I heard him say was he didn't do the edge-to-edge calibration, wasn't necessary. And I've gone through that, and I've gotten it down, I think twice, and I got it down to like 2.5 millimeters, the correction.
Right.
But
Yeah.
he said he didn't do it. And I think he said that you calibrate yours every time you use it, or every day, or maybe every project. And but it only takes you a couple minutes, and you didn't use the edge to edge. And I guess I wanted to get a little more explanation or clarification, if I could, of what you do and why you maybe calibrate every time.
Drew, I had a question. Let me pop in there real quick. Is that true that it calibrates every time you do a project?
What do you mean?
Because he said right now that Casey said that it calibrates every time you do a project.
I don't want to speak for Casey, but do you mean reset the chains, Casey? No? Okay. I'm not sure. Yeah.
No, what I do is I generally go through and I check my calibration before I start a full day of cutting. So last time I was on, that's what Art is referring to, is if I know I'm going to be cutting all day, I'm doing a big job, or I'm cutting very expensive materials, what I'll do is I'll do a quick check on my calibration. And what I mean by that is if you go into your calibration tabs, I usually go in and I just do a quick calibration, or actually I check the movement on my Z-axis, on the Z-axis tab. And if it seems like it's a little bit out, I'll just dial that in a little bit more to get it to where it needs to be.
Makes sense.
You don't have to do the 3 tabs before that, or the 4 tabs before that. That's all standard data. Once you enter it, it's locked in. So you can literally go into calibration and just click on the Z tab and go over there and run a quick measurement on that to see how far 5 down and 5 up in millimeters, to see if the Z axis is still fairly decent or within calibration. If mine isn't, and sometimes I do find like 2 weeks beforehand I was cutting and my accuracy on my Z axis was better than 1 millimeter. Well, 2 weeks later, I fire everything up and I go in and I check, and my accuracy on my Z axis is now 1.2 for some reason. Well, what I do is at that time, I go ahead and I just run it a couple of times and dial it back in to get it, better than 1 millimeter. And I just save it from there, and I set my new home for my Z axis. It's kind of the same thing with the calibration, what we were talking about. If I know I'm doing a full day's worth of calibration or a full day's worth of work, what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll check the top and bottom and side and side. I will go in there and just in the edge calibration tab, I'll click on it and let my sled move over there. and just take a look at it and make sure that it's not, you know, this far away, or it's not running past the board. It's, you know, it's really, really on there. That's what I mean. I just check my calibration before I do a full day's cutting or cut on expensive material. Now, if it looks like I'm way out on my calibration, then I would probably just go ahead and go back through and do another edge calibration to see what it comes up with.
Okay. So that is basically for people that have already calibrated the machine before, correct? Not
Yeah.
for the first time users, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if I'm really out of whack on my calibration, my edge calibration, then what I will do is I will do actually a reset chains. So I will move my sprockets back to where they need to be. I put my chain on there, and then I go ahead and click reset chains, and then I run a edge calibration, because I know where my chains were marked. I know when I did my edge calibration, I was within 1 to 2 millimeters on my edge all the way around. So I had a great calibration at that time. So I know my marked chains are perfect. So that's what I run off of. So if for some reason, I don't know, the kids run into it with a car or something in the garage, heck, who knows? I will go ahead and I'll do a quick edge, just move it around. I don't do the calibration. I move it around and see if it looks good. If it's looking good, then I go ahead and start cutting. If it's for some reason on one side or a top or a bottom, it's this close to the edge, and then I move the sled over here on this side or the other top and bottom, the opposite one, but it's like this far from the edge, then I know something is off. So what I'll do is at that time, like I said, I'll go ahead and move until I get my 2 sprockets where they need to be. And I'll just take the chain and rewrap it up and put it back on the marks. And I'll click, I'll click reset chains. And all reset chains does is it resets the machine home, not the work home. It resets the machine home to that exact position. Does that make sense, Art?
Yeah, it does. I set it up once and I cut, and I was off by 1/16 of an inch in one axis and maybe almost 1/8 in another. I think I had an error in my wasteboard dimension, so that's when I redid everything. But after this last time that I reset it, to check that, I actually put a mark on the board, put like a square down from the top of the board to the edge of the disc, and marked that, and then I just ran it over like 200 millimeters or 100 millimeters, whatever, made a mark and measured it and checked it. So I used that as a way to check it also.
Yeah,
Sure.
It was a good first check. And so, okay, well, you do, I mean, the edge to edge, you do that if you're really out of whack or you think it's really out of whack, you go through that process.
yeah. So so if you think about it logically, what's happening is when you're doing your calibration, you do your chain calibration, okay? What that does is you got a top beam that goes across, and then you got 2 chains that come down with a disc on it. So you got a triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have set up your wasteboard and your top beam correctly, when you bring that down, your chain down in the chain calibration tab, your bit should be almost smack on the center of your wasteboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that does is, think about it, you got a triangle, and the 2 obtuse sides of the triangle, you take them away, you got a T. That first part of the chain tab says that the center, right, is perfectly centered with your top beam, and it's square with the top beam. That doesn't mean that your wasteboard isn't square. That's what edge calibration does. So the first calibration you do with the chain, mathematically, what it does is it says, okay, now I've got a perfect T. It's perfectly square, 90 out, and the center of the beam is right where it should be. When you do the edge calibrations, you move away from that center of your spoil board and you start checking the edges. And that tells you whether or not your spoil board is a little skewed side to side. Now, the reason why I don't do the precision calibration is I never cut a 4x8 sheet of plywood on mine. I usually cut mine in half, and I cut smaller items, and I will literally take those and I put those right in the center of my spoil board anyway. So I don't cut clear out on the edges. So I don't need to do an edge or a precision calibration that way. I never have, and I make furniture with mine. So I
That was
don't.
kind of my mindset was,
Yeah,
doing
great job
smaller
explaining that,
pieces
Casey.
anyway. So, yeah, that's good. That really helps, Casey. I appreciate the
Hey,
input.
Yeah, the hardest thing about the M2 and the whole system of it hanging on the wall is it is trying to figure out where it is. And that's what all of the calibration is based off of. So Casey did a great job there explaining of how the chains know where they are. And then it's like, okay, this is where the machine itself is. Okay, now where's my material? And that's what edge material is saying is like, all right, so if we have this machine, then where is that in relative to the material? So it's almost like a stage 2, if you will, of like diving into your machine and really dialing it in for the material that you're cutting.
Yeah,
Yeah, the first-
that's right. Your first piece is really saying, well, here's the center, here's my motors. I know the length of my top beam. So you're ensured that you got a perfect T. And whenever you do that, if you're not too far left or right on the center of your spoil board, then that tells you that your spoil board is really well centered on your top beam, which is critical. I always tell people, I don't mind having a skew because I don't do my edge calibration like that. I don't worry about that. When I put a board up there, I want to know it's right in the center of my chains and my top beam, because that's where I get the best accuracy over and over and over. That's what I do.
Yeah, I've actually had to take my spoil board off and remount it after, the frustration of not being able to get it right. And I built my frame out of Unistrut
Oh,
because I was just afraid of lumber not staying straight. I figured I could hold it more square or keep it flatter by using, Unistrut to build the frame. So that's worked out well. When I mounted the spoil board, I had some guys helping me, and we thought we had it level, and it wasn't quite. So I had to take all the screws back out of that and re-level it. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah, that's good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I answer your questions there, Art.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Casey. Appreciate
All right.
it.
hey, I was going to ask, because it's been a while since I've done any calibration. The edge calibration is where you measure from the edge of the sled, right? And the precision is where you do the
Yes.
little drill point. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So precision was that was like a Maslow trick, was using the precision calibration. And with the old, like original Maslow, and Lauren knows about this, you had to calibrate a lot. And that was one of the biggest things, is making sure that it was square. So it's kind of a holdover from that, from what I understand. And I don't have tons of experience with the original Maslow, but I've done precision calibration a couple times, but I never do it on mine. When I'm cutting stuff, I do what Casey just talked about, of making sure the chains are reset and then, going through an edge calibration again.
Okay. I actually did the precision when I was setting up mine
Nice.
a year ago
Yeah.
now. But I never went to the edge. I was like, I know I'm never going to get to the corners. And I knew when I bought the machine that it couldn't handle it without the longer chains, which I don't have. So I just went, I think I was like 14 inches from the edge. And I just drilled my little points for my precision and made sure that I was accurate within that. So I basically just have like a 6 by 3.5 area that I know I'm safe in, and I never go outside of it.
Yeah, so you can actually, when
Oh,
you
that's
do
great.
when you do precision calibration, you can tell it what kind of an offset you want. There's a box down there. You can set that in. So you can say 6 inches offset, or 16 millimeters, 25 millimeters, whatever it is, because some people won't want their sled to run over. But because you entered in all of the information, including the diameter of your sled, or the length of your top beam, the center point, all of that, when you do edge calibration, it knows when you were done with your change, you said, hey, the bit is right here, the center of my bit on your spoil board. Well, the system's an intuitive system. It knows that your sled, you put the number in. If you remember on the sled tab, you said my sled is this big. So
Mhm.
it knows from the center of that bit to the edge of the sled where it should be. So when you run the chain, when you run the edge calibration, it's trying to calculate that, okay, the bit was here. I know the edge here, 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 and here, and it tries to move it over as close as possible where it's at. So it's kind of doing the same thing as the precision, only it's using the edge of the sled as a position point, where precision calibration, instead of taking into account the sled, it looks at exactly where the bit is, because you drill the hole with the bit. You tell it how deep and how far away from the edge.
Yeah.
So to me, like I said, it's not that precision isn't, it's not useful. It is useful for some people, I'm sure. For me, I've just found that I've never really needed it. I always just do edge calibration. If that doesn't seem right, I do a quick chain reset, then I run through the edges again. It looks like it's good. Boom, we're off to the races. This whole process takes me, like I said, maybe 10 minutes and I'm done.
Right.
I'm running.
Yeah. And having all those base numbers to start with. Those
Yeah,
are-
I showed that in the
Saved a lot
video.
of
I
time.
write mine down.
Yep.
Some people write them down on their spoil board. I used to write them down and promote people. Hey, keep these numbers, write them on your spoil boards or on the skirts that you put around your frame. Now I've gotten to a point to where I have those little sticky notes on my laptop. I just pull one of those up and I've pasted it all in there. So I have all of my information. And whenever I'm going through the calibration tabs, I literally copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste right there on the screen. And I just start knocking it out.
It's a lot faster that way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's a lot quicker.
Yeah. Mine are on my top beam.
The only thing I would add to that is don't be afraid to take those same things that Casey's done and put them into a cloud-based drive or a thumb drive or something like that, because when I change laptops, having that quick access to my calibration settings, and you can actually, like he said, you can go into the, I think I mentioned it last week that Mike taught me that you can go in and export and import your calibration, and the system will automatically do all those things for you. To when you run that last setting, edge or precision, depending on your preference, it'll do it very quickly.
Yeah, there's actually a way you can go in and export your calibration data. I was
Right,
thinking about
that's what I'm
that might
talking
not be
about.
that wouldn't be a bad idea to do a quick video on that, on how to, once you have a really good calibration and you're really happy with it, then you go back in there later and you export that calibration
Copy it,
data out.
yeah.
So you constantly have that as a
Right.
record to go back to, right? And you
So
can actually
that's my
load
preference.
calibration data. So you can extract it, keep it, and then copy that and paste it into that file in Makerverse and reload that calibration data. So you don't have to constantly redo it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I do. And at the same time, like you mentioned, though, there's a good point though, is like going through all those numbers, because honestly, I don't trust the system all the time, and I always like to validate that because you'll see it when you export that calibration data, it pops up most of those numbers, but there's extra numbers that I like to go off of, especially because as I get closer to moving and having to take down my machine and put it back up again, making sure everything matches up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that export calibration is really nice. You just copy and paste. It's like the last tab in the calibration. You can go over there and copy it, and then you just paste it back in that same tab when you're ready to import it.
I'm still running 1.1.3, and it's I think it's bottom right at the first page.
Is the export? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Bottom
I'll have it
right,
up
Yeah,
on-
but you can see them in the last tab if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you can see it on any of them. I think it's throughout the entire thing. You can go down and hit export or import.
Let's see.
And the fact that like MakerVerse wants you to log in anyway, so you pretty much
What's
need
at the top?
internet access. Yeah, it's one of the two. It's just it's a good idea to go ahead and, like I said, Google Drive is obviously a free method. All you need is an email address and you're up and running, which is obviously free. Thumb drives are also a good backup, and the fact that y'all send a thumb drive with every purchase. So yeah. It's just good to keep redundant copies. It saved me for sure. And the first time I actually did it, this would make Casey tweak, but I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to run a calibration. I'm just going to import and see what happens. And it was dead on. It was dead on the money, even completely different system. Because I was pretty worried that it was just going to be like really askew or it's going to throw a circle, but it cut a circle, which is the hardest, in my opinion, the hardest shape to cut is a circle accurately. It cut a circle within less than a 32nd of an inch. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Art, have you cut any test stuff out yet? Or are you still working on calibration?
No, I've cut a couple glue clamps. I saw a pattern and I cut a couple of those, and that's where I discovered I was a little off in the XY axis, and then I recalibrated. So since then I've been off building some cutting boards, so I haven't had time to do anything. Probably get back to it in the next week or so.
Awesome.
I was going to ask any things to look out for with using the laser and engraving. I haven't even unboxed that. It's still in the wrapping in a drawer here. But that was one of the things my daughter was most interested in, and I think she'll be the one to probably do that.
Well, you got to make sure you set the settings in Makerverse, and that's all like written out in the instructions there, so you can go through to make sure that you have all the values and stuff for the laser and your laser turned on. But it sounds like you're a woodworker if you're making cutting boards and stuff. So
yeah.
I've heard some people using it for like tracing for routing. So to do like hand routing, you can do something as a pattern. You could pattern with the laser because it's a 2.8 watt. So it's more for engraving than cutting. It can't cut through a whole lot of stuff. It's more for like engraving and finishing and stuff like that. But I've heard that that's one of the main uses I've heard for people that are already woodworkers is use it as kind of like a template, and then you can follow that with your hand bits.
Sure. Yeah, I was actually thinking of just, like on the back, inscribe who it's for and a date and who made it, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like you just flip over the cutting board and then like engrave right on the back of the cutting board or something like that. It'd be perfect for that.
That's what I had in mind, maybe as a test anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Art, there's also, if you were talking about watching the videos for calibration, I also have 2 videos on the laser too. There's a video up there on the channel for actually focusing the laser using the little focus tool, the little piece of plastic you get.
Right.
And then there's one in there on how to create a file in Lightburn and then save the file and upload it to easel to then generate your G code to load into Makerverse.
Okay, yeah, I've actually seen those. I haven't taken the time yet to, haven't got around really to just digging into that, but I will watch those when I get started.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, and when you're ready, we're always available too. So yeah, you can send us a message if you ever need any help or join these calls, and yeah, we can chat about it and help you get going on the laser too.
Oh, if I'm around, I'll probably join in periodically. One thing when I was doing that just came to mind, I see your sled up in the above your shoulder there. When I was doing the calibration to be able to assure that I was hitting kind of the tangent point on the outside of that sled, I took it off, put a square on centers, 90 degrees off, and put little marks on it. So when you're measuring, you're hitting, the kind of the tangent point on the outside of that, so you aren't up or down.
Measure from the same place.
Yeah, you might be able to see it.
Yeah.
You can see the tape on there with the arrows.
Mm-hmm.
I put those on because I thought I was having trouble, hitting the same spot all the time. And it might be something to think about anyway. It was a good way I thought it helped me calibrate a little better. Oops, the light's not very good here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've talked about some stuff too of using the insert. I think Casey has mentioned this before as well, is like trying to use that insert to help center your bit and things like that, because that can be kind of a difficult thing to get. So you can kind of use the like cardboard insert that it comes with and kind of trace that out and use it to center your bit. Doing little tricks like that and like marking the sled is a great idea.
Yeah, one of the first things I did was cut a disc for that centering purpose.
Yeah,
piece of plywood or Baltic birch, and it fit real well. It works real well.
Great. That's perfect.
The other thing I did for the dust collection, you know, you have that plastic insert.
Whoop, uh-oh. There you go, you there? My internet's
Yes.
being weird.
You have the plastic insert, and you know, if you're using the laser or something, getting that in and out, I think is hard. I took it where it sits under the frame for the Z-axis. I cut it in half. And then I took some little window screen tabs that you turn to hold the piece, you know, around the bit. And then on the other end, I drilled it out and glued an elbow on and put some little L brackets on it to support the elbow where I can hook my dust collector hose on. And then that way on that upper piece, the piece around the bit, I can just turn those two little thumb turns, lift that plastic out. And I actually put some foam gasket material around the perimeter of it to seal it up. And it works pretty well. It picks up all the dust. I did have to drill the hole around the bit out a little larger. I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches or so, because it sucks so hard. It pulled the sled right down to the table, and I was afraid it was going to drag it down to the point that, you know, it would impede the movement a little bit.
Casey's talked about that before with his dust collection of like sucking too much suction. Yeah, can be a problem.
Yeah, I turned it on and just kind of pulled it away, and there was quite a bit of resistance there. So I actually clamped it down, took a hole saw and drilled the opening around the bit out, so you got a little more air moving through it.
Yeah, nice.
And that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, that's the awesome thing about the modifications and stuff that you can make to it. Is like you can fit it to whatever's going to work for your wood shop. If you want to go for 0 dust, you can do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have
dust
one of our
collecting.
one of our users here within our group. They have a 1800 CFM dust collector, and he called me one day. He had purchased my dust collection kit and sent it to him and everything, and he hooked it up, and it uses a 4-inch vacuum hose to the 2-inch outlet. And he said that as he was going, he could see the sled jumping like this all the way across the board. So I had actually designed mine to where it has the same thing, little thumb tabs, and you can take a port, one of the glass ports out of it, or open the port just a little bit to actually let air in, which reduces the vacuum pressure that you get on the inside. And he said that he ended up taking the whole top port off. He just opened it up and popped a piece of glass out. And he goes, it runs great now. And he goes, nothing comes out of the hole. There's so much air going in that hole.
Yeah, mine's a smaller system. It's only like 600 CFM, I think.
Yeah,
And,
but I mean, some shops, you know, that's why I put it actually has 2 different holes where you can actually open it up to allow air in, because I didn't know what kind of CFM people would be using. I know there's all the way out there to 2100 CFM I've seen on the market. And then for most normal shops, you know, you see most people have anywhere between just a normal vacuum cleaner, which actually is really low. It's like 180 CFM, up to the things like I got, which are right at 850 CFM. And those are 4-inch air hoses. It's the shop box. So, and those run great. You don't even have to open up the glass. It slides pretty good. But I think anything much over 1000 CFM, and you'll probably have to start opening up vacuum ports to let some of the vacuum pressure release.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just use like a little dust vac for mine too, and it works pretty good. I mean, it's a little bit dusty, but for what I'm doing, yeah, it works great. So yeah, right on. What are you gonna make, Art? What kind of stuff do you want to make with the M2 besides kind of
I'll
engraving some
probably
names and
cut
stuff?
pieces for furniture. I don't know. I just got kind of interested in it. My daughter said, "Oh, we ought to buy one of these." And she kept telling me how to buy it. And I said, "No, I'm not going to spend the money." And finally, she goes, I said, "If you'll go half on it, I'll do it." And it ends up in my shop because I got sawdust collector and filter and all that stuff in here.
Mhm.
So although I had to rearrange the whole shop, moving everything from 1 inch to 2 feet to across the room to fit this thing in, but Probably furniture, try some engraving. I'm always coming up
Awesome.
with something to keep myself busy.
Yeah, right on. Well, this evening, if you want to learn how to make signs, we're doing a little workshop. We're having a live event this evening. Lauren's going to be there. And he's going to be talking to everybody about the types of stuff that he makes and creating some different signs and how different sign makers are using the M2. So that's going to be tonight at 5 Central, I believe.
Okay. Did you get it through this same link, or how do you access that?
We posted it. It's another Zoom link. I can post it in the chat, and it's posted on our owners group. So are you a member of our owners group on Facebook?
I can't remember if I've signed up for that or not yet.
Well, we've got it there, and I'll post it here so you can find it as well. I got the link. Let me just grab it here. And let's see. Oop. Just copy all this. Yeah, so we're really looking forward to that. Gonna have kind of a panel discussion and talk about how everybody's using it.
Yeah, I join in.
Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, you're muted, Lauren.
Is what?
That explains why you're looking at me funny. Now, has there been more discussions about more bits? Because I did that bit y'all sent me. It took me a minute, but I finally did quite a bit of testing with it, both sides. And it does well for what it does. But and I like the fact that it's double-sided. Actually, I was kind of worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think y'all could partner with another company, the ones like one of the bigger companies that has more of an option, because when I started doing larger engravings, especially anything outside of a 1/4 inch wide of an engraving, the bits struggled.
Did I really? Yeah. Was that the 1/8 inch?
No, it's the 1/4 inch. The 1/4
quarter.
inch, the double-ended engraving bit. The V-carve is a 90 and a 60.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I'm finding is those bits are really good for a lot of fine text. But the router, I mean, because most of us are using a larger router or a router that can handle it. And because like I've tested it back and forth between my new 4x4 and the M2, most of what I'm cutting, like I ran my new 4x4 up just to see what would happen. Most engravings work much better below 50 inches per minute anyway. At a higher speed, you get a lot cleaner of a cut.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, I mean, the M2 is only sitting at 15 inches slower than that. So it's not that much slower. It's just a matter of the bits. It has to be a really clean cutting bit. And I don't mean a bit like it needs to be a CNC bit, because I use some different, the V bits that you would use with a normal router, just normal routing. And it just doesn't hold up as well. As soon as you get about halfway through the cut, the bit starts to build up a lot of residue, and it just doesn't have, and I didn't even realize this, and I was getting frustrated. A lot of the bits, like the paddle style bit, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but you know what I'm saying, like the normal router style bits, it actually has a flat tip. It looks pointed.
Yeah,
but
to go around a table or something. Yeah, or like a router table or
the way
something.
The way the bits line up, it actually has a flat tip. And next time you look at them, so engraving wise, you run into a little bit of a problem there. So I think there's some other bits that I would like to bring up to the team that I think, and y'all could, there's a lot of companies out there, and even like a V-carve bit with a flat tip specifically designed. Because the weakness the M2 has is changing bits, if I'm gonna be honest. Like that's the weakness that you have. And
it doesn't have any sort of tool change. And it's a hassle because like Casey was saying, you got to make sure, everything's calibrated on the Z-axis.
Exactly. And mine right now doesn't have tool change, but what it does have is it has that automatic depth, right? You can run the probe function and it's dead on.
Mm-hmm.
The issue there is like when you're doing engraving is when you're trying to like carbide create, right? You're doing an advanced V-carve and then you're using the fill function. And I found a bit online that's it's a 60-degree V-bit, or you get them all the way up down to a 30-degree V-bit, but it's got at the very tip, it's about a 1/16 of an inch wide, or you can get an eighth inch wide flat tip on it. So it can still do the V carve, but it can still clean out as well. I thought that was a very unique bit that I found, and I was like, that would be a great bit for an M2 owner, because you don't got to change that bit out.
So we're working on, we're still researching different router bits and stuff like that. So, and testing them out ourselves. And so we'd love to see if you want to send that info over and like those types of bits, like we want to write some articles, even talk to Casey about doing some videos on like the bits that he uses as well. Cause that's a huge part of using this machine, is figuring out like what bit is going to work best for the project that you're going to try to make. And there's so many out there as a beginner to try to find. That would be great to see, you know, like tips and tricks and stuff like that. And tonight it'd be awesome to hear about like different bits that you use on, you know, different signs and things like that too. Would be great.
Yeah. I mean, first, like I went through the recommendations that she sent, because I mean, all those questions, literally all the questions I've answered at some point or another. You know, friends are finally reaching out and being like, hey, how did you do that? Why did you do that? And then people I work with to find out, like, you know, this guy's got a random side business that he's running. But there's just a lot of pieces like that I'll go with the flow, and if people are interested, I'm, you know, more than happy to bring it up. But I already know I talk a lot anyway, so it's fun. Like, I don't want to take over the meeting or anything. But yeah, like another thing I discovered, that a lot of the bits that we use, the actual burning actually starts more because the machine runs too slow. I ran into that if you don't turn down the router quite a bit more than even I thought. Like I thought, okay, it's not burning as much, you know, turn the router down.
And you mean the RPMs, or do you mean the movement, the XY movement?
Well, I'm talking like, see if your speed rate, right, of the feed rate of the machine versus the speed rate of the router. Right. I find like the combination is not a direct correlation. I thought it was. I thought it would be a direct correlation. Like, okay, if the speed or the feed of the machine is at 30 inches per minute, right? Then I can turn the router down. Versus if I'm running 15 inches per minute and turn the router down even lower, versus my 4x4 running 75 inches per minute and then turning the router up. I thought that would be a direct correlation. But as I did tests and I kind of ran with it, it doesn't directly correlate, because we're not adjusting a router to a specific, like it's very hard to get an exact speed. And even then, especially on V-carve, I saw a massive difference with running. I maxed the router out at 18, or it was like 26,000 inches or RPM, and then turn it down to about, this is on a 4x4, but it'd been equivalent of doing like 15 inches per minute on the M2. And it came out so much cleaner just slowing it way down, especially because of bit deflection and things like that. But it also give it time, because as you're cutting through a surface, those I call them frizzies, but you know what I'm talking about. It cleans that up. It does a lot better job of that. There's just a lot of little things like that I noticed doing little tests as I'm getting into a lot more cutting boards and things like that. I just found it interesting, the difference in the two, because I really thought it was going to be a direct correlation, and it wasn't.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see on like how that's moving, because I know burnout can happen on like both ways, like going too fast or going too slow, and it's based on the wood too. So it's like if you're using a softer wood, it can happen, you know, when it's spinning really fast. So yeah, that's a great tip. So what normally, like when you're using that, are you using the same type of wood on all of that when you're creating it, or
so I was doing a little bit of mixture between. I mean, my main priority types of wood right now is it's pine, of course, because it's always readily available. Anywhere from birch plywood to actual birch wood. And then we just got, we did a whole bunch of rubber wood. We got a good deal on some rubber wood, which is a rare wood. It's just a whole, basically a company down here. It's a salvage warehouse. Got a whole bunch of butcher block rubber wood. So we did those. And then now we got a bunch of, it's walnut, I think, if I remember correctly, a bunch of walnut butcher block that is I'm trying some stuff out with. Obviously plywood has the worst of frizzies, and like slowing it down cleans those up more.
Yeah, because the glue.
The rubber wood, which I'd cut with before, and had zero frizzies with the M2. I did it with the 4x4, and I got some, and I realized it was due to the speed. But then I went back and checked my cut, and I realized when I originally did it with the M2, I actually had it, the router turned all the way up. I had forgot I had it turned up, and the M2 was running at it was like 20 inches per minute, so it was running really slow and clean, and that's how I got this like a very clean cut with it. V-carving plywood has resulted in some real pain, only because the layers of the plywood, they're not, depending on where you buy the plywood, not all the layers, and like not all plywood you buy has the exact same layers, right? If you buy true Baltic birch, layers are very clean. They tend to be all made of birch plywood. They're just layers of it, right? But if you go to your home goods store, those layers may be types of MDF. There's all kinds of stuff that they'll fill them with that isn't true wood.
Veneer.
And doing those cuts, man, those different layers of wood directly affect that bit a lot, and a massive amount when it comes to 90 degree versus 60 degree. It just makes a massive difference. But the other thing that surprised me, and I don't know if there's a way to get around it, but the other day, my router or my system skipped a step in the G code, and I don't know how it happened. I don't know if I think it was more likely not the system. It was more likely the computer, because I was using my older computer at the time. And I'll be honest, it's 12 years old. Like, it did funky things. It probably wasn't the system, but it skipped. And so using an 1/8 inch bit, it plunged to a full 3/4 depth and started to cut at 3/4 depth, not at 1/8 inch at a time.
Did it break?
It didn't. It cut actually just fine, except for when it plunged. Obviously, like, I heard it, right? Like, everybody's heard me, like that real loud, like, noise, like that bit's like, what the hell are you doing to me, right? But the bit held up, and I'm talking the cheap bits that I showed before, not an expensive bit at all. It held up, and it was pulling it. The real problem it had is because the way the sled works, it actually pulled the sled up a little bit, so it wasn't cutting perfectly smooth. Because it took me about 5 seconds to get everything shut down, but it cut a good amount of an arc. And it was one of those things that if you could stop that sled from lifting up, the machine will cut it. And I was surprised, because I really think, like, you can cut deep cuts and you can do those things slowly. It's just the sled, it wants to pick up that full depth cut, or a deeper cut the sled wants to pick up. And the only way to stop that is to stand over your sled and hold it down flat as it pulls it around the arc.
And I've seen people do that too. Like when it gets close to the edge or something, like make sure that it doesn't tilt off.
Yeah, I've done it before, realizing like, oh, I forgot to put in my what do you call it, my framing board, or the
skirt.
The skirt board. But it's kind of one of those things where, like, I was just fully surprised. I thought for sure I was like, oh, I've screwed up. Like, this thing's about to snap. No, I reset the program, restarted my computer, and made sure everything was, wasn't going to do it again. And it started the HUD up over again. Not a problem. No, same bit just kept on chugging.
Right on. Yeah.
But it was interesting that it'll actually, it'll do it. It's just that sled is the problem, because that pivot point now, it creates a point where it wants to lift that sled up.
Especially when the router's going around so much. There's a lot of different forces at play.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have a catastrophe for a minute, especially when that bit screamed at me. But
so I did create a little tool for bit change out. So it ensures that no matter where you have your Z-axis set, because I have a tendency to lift my Z-axis as high as I can get it, but I usually take the router off the sled. I just unloosen 2 bolts and slide it out. And I have a little jig that I put on the end of the router. So it ensures whatever bit I'm putting in next is exactly the same depth inside of the router as the original one.
That's really smart. So basically, do you not tighten the bit down till you put the router back into the sled?
I tighten the bit down in the router, while it's out of the sled. And I have a ring with a lip. So I just slide the router in until it sits on that lip in the clamp. So
Is that 3D
Oh, I
printed?
see exactly what you're saying.
Make it
So
out
everything
with-
is
basically-
standard. Everything is set and standard.
Yeah, but you could do, yeah. I mean, basically what you did is you did your centering jig without a hole in it. Yeah,
Pretty close. But it
I mean,
has
yeah,
a
I
top
mean-
and a bottom. It has a top and a bottom that encases the bit. And then you have to deal with, okay, so once you take your router out, you have to put the router back into a given depth. So I have a bolt-on ring that I put on my router. So I can
See
slide
it?
the router in and out of the clamp, the router clamp, and it always goes back to the same depth.
because in my head, if you could make
That's a good plan.
that concept in my head, like that centering jig, right? If there's a way to lock that thing in,
But then you
and
have
make
the,
three different
then you
ones,
have
one for an
the,
eighth.
then you have the concern of where you have your Z axis set.
Well,
If your Z axis moves up and down, your bit can sit there, but you can move the Z axis up and down because the bit's locked in. So I take the router out. So I put the bit in my little jig and I put the jig on the end of the router and I twist the router until the bit's tight. Now I
Well,
know
I'm
I have
thinking-
exactly the same amount of bit sticking out of the bottom of my router every time. They're always the same. And then I go ahead and tighten that down with a wrench and my router has a set ring on it. And I can take that and I just slide it into the clamp on the M2 until it's setting on that ring is setting on the clamp and I tighten it down. I might be out a half a millimeter on my depth.
Do you zero your
See what I was-
Z
What?
when do you zero your Z before you remove your router?
I
before you take it out?
I don't, so I don't re-zero my Z if I'm doing if I'm doing cutting something that needs 2 bits. All I do is ensure before I remove my router, I go to home on my Z axis. So it automatically moves my Z axis with the bit to where I originally set my home. And I
Okay.
check on my board to make sure the bit's where it was. Then I go ahead and undo the 2 bolts on my clamp, remove the router and go ahead and take off the bit, use my little jig, put it on, tighten up the bit, slide it back in there. And I make sure the next bit is right where the other bit was. And I've never had a problem with it. Works perfect every time.
That's great.
See, I was,
Yeah, that's a
I
really
was
good
actually thinking they use your centering jig, you create 3 of them, or technically 4, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 90 degree, 60 degree, because that's 90% of your bits right there. And basically the centering jig, it bottoms, like basically make it thicker where it sticks out a little bit below the router. But it's got, just a simple 1/8 inch hole all the way to the base of that sled. So when you drop in, you tighten in the bit, however, right, whatever length you have from the router, then all you do is you make sure the Z axis is low enough that when you slide it back in that clamp, it seats all the way to the base of that jig. You push the jig up to the base of the sled and then tighten down the router, and then you've locked it in at 0.
Using my little
But you
jig
have-
is easier than that. I'm a lazy
does,
guy.
but
I
I'm
just want to
thinking-
undo 2 bolts, pull it off, slide the new bit in, tighten it down and slide it back in and away we go. I let the
Yeah,
jig do the thinking for me. It makes sure that the idea is to make sure from the bottom of your collet when it's tightened, from the bottom of your collet to the bottom of your bit is always the same distance.
Then that
Right.
makes
When you
sense.
go
It
from
makes
one
sense,
bit
but
to
I'm thinking,
another. So I just designed a tool that does that. That's all I did.
yeah, I'm just thinking for other people when it comes, if you wanted to sell it, like not everybody's gonna have the same router. I don't know if it clamps
It
around the
doesn't
router
matter.
and then you have,
It doesn't matter because you always set a work home with your Z axis. So it doesn't matter if you're using the same router or not.
but your
I've
jig
got
attaches to your router.
I've got
jig,
3
right?
different, I've got 3 different routers I use it on. Works the same on all 3 routers.
Do you have a set ring on your route, all 3 routers too? To
Yeah.
hold them in. Where'd you get the
Yeah,
set ring?
it's just a ring with a little slice in it, and I have a bolt that I tighten down on it so it clamps.
Oh,
up
you, so you
tight.
got.
Oh, like
made it
those
out of,
pipe
like, oh,
clamp
you 3D
type
printed it
things.
basically?
Kind of, only it's all, of course, it's 3D printed. I designed and printed the whole thing myself, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I got a little ring, and the only thing is the ring, if I mean, within 5 millimeters. I mean, so it'll cover, a single ring will cover several different sizes of routers. Yeah. It's a split ring. So
Yeah.
I was thinking about putting it
Mhm.
on the, this weekend, I'm trying to get my MakerMade storefront back up, and I thought I might put that
Yeah, I
on
haven't
there. I've
done
been
any of
using
that.
it
You
for a
should.
while. I've never told anybody
set-
about it, but
I was going to ask you about that if you're going to put that in the store, because I think that'd be awesome. I think
Yeah,
people would
because
like
the
it.
set ring, man, that makes a lot of sense, because that's the thing, is it quickly allows you to drop your router in, because I do that all the time. Like, I'll plunge my routers too far down and I'm easing it back out with a set ring. I just pop it back in, it bumps the set ring, and I'm running away again. I would even make it, because I'm a little over the top. It shouldn't matter, but as you know, if they don't have a full centering jig, or if they have, I would make it to where, like, part of the split ring has a component to it that slips over the top of the, what do you call it, the clamp, where the router is always faced the same way when you drop it in. You know what I'm saying? So it isn't turned.
yeah, I mean, you could do that. You can make it a little wider with a square with 2 lips on it, so it always
Yeah.
sits in the same way. But I do that whenever I put my router back in. All I care is that the damn on off button, I can get to it.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
all
I started
care
turning mine
about.
the
So I
same
make
way.
sure the on
Yeah.
off button is roughly facing the same way. But that, as long as it's sitting in there, the thing is there's so many different types of dust collectors, and people are using different types of systems like that I wanted to be able to just pull out the router, so you didn't have to worry about what you had on your sled.
Yeah.
So you just undo 2 bolts, pull out your router, unloosen the collet, and then you pull the old bit out, put the new one in, slide it up on there. It sets it automatically. Tighten down the collet, and then you just slide your router back into the thing until the collar, and you just tighten down those 2 bolts. I don't know. My son hit me with a stopwatch. I was just checking to see, because if I do put it on the store, I'd want to advertise how easy of a bit it is to change out, the depth, how fast. It took me roughly about 2.5 minutes to change out the bit, and then put it right back into where it was. Because remember, if you zero out, or you don't zero out, if you go to home on your Z-axis when you're ready to change out your bit, your Z-axis then is where the machine work home was already set. So
Right.
that's what your goal is to make sure the bit is in there as per your previous bit and cut. So I go ahead and send everything when you're done cutting. Usually your M2 will go down to the corner or where the original your work home was, right? It'll go there, and it'll even home the Z-axis. So once it's there, I just go over to my computer and I click, go to home for the Z, and make sure it's where it's supposed to be. And then I do the bit change. And whenever I put the new one in and tighten it all down, I just peek in there and it looks good, and it's right where it needs to be. It's right on the mark on my board for my original home, and it looks like it's the same distance away. After that, we're golden.
Yeah.
Let's go to town. It takes 2 minutes to change out a bit, and I can swap out my bits on the fly. I mean, the only thing I guess from the bits from your part, Drew, with MakerMade themselves, I've been waiting for a round over bit. All I've got
Oh, yeah.
are flat square bits, and I got the 45 and the 60-degree angle one that you guys have, the double-ended bits. I've ran
Yeah. Let me
those,
see if that's in the pipeline.
but I don't see any bullnose bits in there. You really need to have one.
We've talked about bullnose. We might have some at the shop that I think Joel was testing. Let me look, because I'm like 99% sure that we got bullnose bits to
Well,
test.
Patrick had sent me a bundle of them, and one of the boxes says bullnose bit, 1/4 inch bullnose. When I
Yeah.
opened it up, it was a normal double fluted down cut. So I
So we threw it in there.
messing with Patrick. I was doing a FaceTime with him and I said, "Hey, does this look like a freaking bullnose to you?"
Yeah.
So I think they put the wrong bits in the wrong box. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I
that
have
can,
yet to
it can
test one that is, I have yet to test one that's a roundover like that. And I'll tell you what, for people that are doing things like cutting boards and stuff like that. So the cutting boards, the M2 is really good on cutting boards. Okay. As long as you have proper skirting on there for a 2-inch board, it'll slide around and it'll cut it really well. But if you want that nice rounded juice groove, which is a big money maker, you know, you guys are talking about signs and stuff. Man, cutting boards are big money makers. You need a roundover bit to cut those juice grooves and things like that. And I would think that you would want a roundover bit for LED lighting on signs, because most LED lighting is round tube, right? You can cut a perfect, you know,
Right,
1
yeah.
inch or whatever depth. So the tubing fits perfectly in there with a roundover bit. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll look at that and see as we're kind of going through all this. Because I'm going to be up the shop later today. So I'll look and see in our like little testing batch and see if there's one over there. So yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I think that's a great idea. And we want to have a good variety for, you know, different uses of things so people can find exactly what the type of bits they need. Or if we can't supply them, we can at least make recommendations for different ones.
I think the bits that you guys sent me to test, I got the 1/8, I got the 1-inch quarter, or the 1/4 inch. I got the up and down and the combo. I got the angled. I've used them all. They all work really well. I mean,
Great.
to be honest with you, I'm happy with them. But again, anytime I'm cutting things, I don't cut as fast as most people on the M2. Like I said, you know, Lauren was alluding to it earlier. People always ask me, man, you always say you go 15 to 20 inches per minute. Why do you go so slow? Because it saves me about 3 hours of cleanup time later. I hate sanding. So
Yeah.
I'll take a compression bit or a down cut bit and run it through regular plywood. And if I run it 15 to 20 inches per minute, I don't get all the fibers that stick up along the edges. So I don't have to sand all that crap. It gives me a really nice cut. If I could probably get the thing done, I don't know, in half the time. But then if I run at, you know, 25 to 30 inches per minute, but then I end up sitting there for 2 hours sanding and retrimming and everything else. And I'm lazy. I don't want to touch a sander if I absolutely don't have to.
Yeah. Well,
So I'd
Dustin,
rather cut slow and precise at the beginning, get it done the first shot, and then after you're done with that, you're good.
nice. Yeah.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah. And you talked about too, like using a little water, squirt a little water on there to help you sand it. I remember that tip as well. And I use that on just a thing that I cut out with my jigsaw, and it was awesome.
Yeah. So if you're
nice.
cutting, especially if you're cutting pine, it's all about the fiber that is in the wood. It's all connected fiber, right? Think of it as a big mesh. And what happens is pine, oak does it really well too. As you're cutting through on those, you'll end up with just little hairs on the inside that you want to run that sandpaper around. Think of a cutting board in the juice groove when you cut that. A lot of times that actually the hairs and everything in there, you're trying to sand those down and make it smooth because you can feel them with your fingers, but you can't necessarily see them. So that whole groove feels rough. What you do is while the system is cutting, take a spray bottle and just mist a little bit of water on it. Don't just soak it, but mist a little water. And what happens is when the water touches the wood, those hairs, those fibers, they stand straight up. And the next time the bit goes around, it'll cut those off. So when you're done,
Nice.
you have a lot smoother cut and way less cleanup.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, so I see, Lauren, I was just going to have you check that out, and I saw you just saw Dustin's post about the different types of bits. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that first one, that one he sent, that's an example of one that looks like a point, but it isn't. Whenever you turn the bit and you'll see, but I just sent another one that shows an example of what I was talking about, where it's there's several of them like it. It's basically, you can search it as basically a V-bit with a flat tip, and it's a unique, like, I don't know, I never considered any kind of use for it, but when you're doing clear out, it does very well. Because I've done a lot of like single bit where I got to go back in with my glue stick standing method and clean up those little tiny ridges that are left behind. But this does a much better job of clean out.
Nice.
But yeah, if you search V-bit on Amazon, any of the ones that are like a paddle style, I don't recommend. There's like a double flute, which are not really flutes, but the ones that are, you basically put the cutter in. I'm trying to think of an example. There's one here earlier. Yeah, like one, like, I'll add this to the list. These cut way better.
Yeah, they have the changeable blades whenever they dole out.
Yeah,
You can just buy a pack of
exactly.
blades and it's got one screw.
Ah.
Each blade has 4 sides to it.
Oh
I have
yeah,
that.
I've seen these.
Yeah, I have some
Yeah,
of those.
they do
I
much better.
actually use one of those, a 1-inch diameter for surfacing my spoil board. It has multiple,
Yeah.
it has the multiple blades, and I can just swap, or actually I spin the blade once and it gives me a new cutting area every time I do it. I've been using that one for quite a while. It's
Awesome.
great for surfacing a spoil board, a 1-inch pass all the way across, just back and forth. You surface a spoil board pretty quickly.
Hey, Jan. See you jumped on there.
Hey, Drew.
You got any questions here right at the end? Whoop, not sure.
I got one piece of feedback for you guys.
Yeah.
On your MakerMade website, the drop down at the top has the maker or the marketplace. It
Mhm.
still says it's coming soon up there.
So that's because it's launching at the end of this week.
Okay, I was just
So,
curious because the front page
yeah.
shows the community marketplace and you can click there and get into it, but you can't get it from the top menu.
Sweet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure that gets updated. But I know that not all the links have been updated yet because we soft launched it to do the full launch at the end of it. I think I'm pretty sure on Friday or Monday is when we're going to do that full launch. But I'll make sure that gets updated too, that it doesn't go just to the coming soon.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah, because I was actually looking at maybe adding that loom into the marketplace to see if people are interested in it. So that's how I found it out.
Hey,
Yeah,
Drew, do we have
a
any
lot of-
old flute bits
I don't think so.
like for plastic and stuff, for ABS and things like that?
I don't think so. I know that Patrick and I cut with just a straight bit. We cut some ABS with a straight bit
Okay.
a while back, but I don't think we have a special bit for plastic.
Okay.
Not that I can remember. Yeah.
I mean, to be completely fair, like, yeah, a straight bit won't cut it as well as a specific plastic cutting with a single flute. I don't think it's just probably a spiral flute, but at the end of the day, thinking from a business perspective, like, you're not going to have a ton of customers going after I don't think a lot of them are going after that. But I definitely
yeah.
see the 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and then 90 and 60. A huge portion of your customer base, those 4 bits are going to be what they're cutting with. Like, I'm getting into like the 15 degree and the 30 degree bits now, but I just don't see a lot of people going after that.
Yeah, until you get advanced.
It depends
But I
on
do-
what they're selling, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what it's down to. Now, what Mike was talking about, if you have a dual straight edge, a dual straight bit, right? Not the down cut, not the upcut, but the dual straight bit, those you can use those for really hard woods as well. So, I mean, they work because a lot of the hardwoods, it doesn't matter whether you're using an upcut or a down cut. What phrase is what phrase? So if you're using like a solid hard maple or African purple heart, something like that, those woods, I mean, those are almost like cutting stone. I mean, they're tough. So I know a lot of the guys around me that I know here in the Houston area that do CNC and they do woodworking, when they're cutting really, really hard woods, they'll go with just a straight edge bit. And they'll slow the bit down, they'll slow the RPM down on their router, and they'll slow down on the CNC because the bit will last forever, but it just, you know, it doesn't matter if it's up or down or a compression bit. It just needs to get through it. And that exact thing, if you think about it, the density of that wood, it's the same as if it's the density of your plastic. There's no air in that plastic. It's injection molded. So that's what the straight edge bit does, is it'll run through a denser material.
So I haven't done any materials like that. I was told though that those really dense woods, the reason why they went with straight bit is one, they're cheaper, and two, the harder the wood, the more it'll wear a bit out. I haven't tested it to know for sure, but that's what I was told. Is it just
So if you try to use an up or a down cut bit, because that wood is harder, think about it, a down cut or a compression bit or the up cut, as that's twisting, what it does is it slices the wood, right?
It doesn't just,
where a straight cut is literally shaving the wood as it's going around.
Right.
It's not going against the grain, right? It's just shaving it off.
Yeah.
So
And especially those chips are harder.
Yeah, if you slow your router down and you slow the CNC down, those bits actually, they're pretty tough. They last quite a while, and you'll get 1 or 2 jobs out of a straight bit on a really hard wood. Now you do that with if you try to run standard with like a down cut bit on one of those that hard wood, that bit will be useless about halfway through the cut.
yeah.
And vice versa with the if you try to do any acrylics or any plastics, polymers or anything like that, the cutting, the shaving action like that, it heats the plastic up faster, and the plastic just melts into the bit. And then you got a goo and nothing's cutting.
Slow.
Yeah, so the straight edge bits on that dense plastic, just really slow. Make sure you turn the router down so you're not superheating the material, and just let her go, and it cuts just fine.
Do you think the straight bit would help on open pores, such as like red oak?
Yeah, it might, but I think you'll have some fraying on the edges if you do that.
That's okay.
I think if you spray that with water when you start cutting, you'll see that fraying doesn't happen as much. So that's something you might want to test if you got a little piece of that laying around.
Yeah, I found going around curves on the red oak, it really finds those pores and will catch sometimes. And so I got some chattering on my curved edges that I had to work to clean up. So I was using a down cut bit at the time. So I'll try a straight bit next. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, guys, there's no hard and fast rule on this. This is just, I have another community guys here in Houston. We bullshit about woodworking and stuff. And all these guys are amateurs. None of them are like master woodworkers, but these are all things that we talk about and crap around barbecue and having
Yeah.
This is just stuff that we've all learned, right? And so
That's what we're all about. Sharing ideas.
I even had one guy,
Our experiences.
I had one guy that was doing pine and he wanted to move faster. He has a gantry CNC and he wanted to cut faster on pine. He did his own glue ups and made like a 6 foot by 4 foot piece. And he was running with his bit and he was doing like 130 inches per minute. And he tried all kinds of stuff. He sprayed water. He even used Aquanet hairspray.
I've heard
Just
people
to
do
see
that
what
for
would
3D
happen. Just to see
surfaces and
what
stuff,
would happen, right? And he said it
Pull it in
didn't
place.
happen. It actually just made the garage smell like crap. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny the stuff guys out there have tried. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is
That's
great.
crazy because I go
Yeah.
almost 300 inches per minute. I'm at 280 on my one Infinity, and I'm cutting pine, and everything's good.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the bit you're using. Then I don't know.
Yeah. That it does.
Well, this is
Right,
great. This is
anytime.
awesome to share everybody's experience with different bits and calibration tips and stuff like that. So thanks a lot for sharing, everybody. You got any final questions or anything before we'll take off to our prospective lives around the world?
Jan, you got any questions, Jan? You're the last one that showed up.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hey, Jen.
Oh, great. Yes, first I would like to know how's the status related to the mini frame and the components around. Casey, can you tell me when the parts will be available? I mean for the gains. No, not
Yeah,
gains,
so the
sorry.
mini frame, the mini frame design is all done. I'm waiting for MakerMade to come back, and I think they've got the box, they've got the cost, they got all that. I think they want to build one in their shop and test it themselves. I'm waiting on MakerMade. That's pretty much where we're at right now.
And you
Yeah, I'm
only
not sure. I
got
haven't
that?
been working on that.
What was that?
I'm not sure, but I'll find out. I think that's something Joel's doing, so I'll ask him and see what's going on with that.
And is that just for the
Don't have
mini
it
frame
going
right now, Casey, or is that for like a standard frame as well, an extra large? Right now, just the mini.
So right now it's just the mini frame. As soon as I get another one in, I'm hoping the MakerMade will send me one more frame, and then I'll take the two mini frames and put them together, and that'll give you a full 4x8 foot frame. But I have to design the procedure for connecting those two mini frames together.
So awesome. Sounds promising.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about it. So I'll follow up and see if I can find out the status of that, and let you know. Get somebody
I
to
have
reach out to you,
one
Casey.
further question. Maybe you have an idea. How can I go ahead in a better condition? Because as you can see, the accuracy is not bad. Because you see here, I put or I split this part. It depends on the package. I will have later on a small package. Yes, here this is a prototype. Okay, and this is handmade. And now I started to create it the pre-serial, and I want to split it the parts into different kind of pieces, because for example this will be a gray one, this is a nature one, and it really it fits not bad. Yes, so the accuracy is quite good, but sometimes I got results like that you see here. There are some no, it's not so wrong, this okay, you see here some edges. I don't know exactly why it's working like that, or when it becomes smaller, the smaller one, this one here, you see it's not really fine. And I really don't know exactly what is the reason why sometimes it fits. For example, when you see this is quite good.
What size of bit are you using? My first question.
The bit is I don't know, 3 millimeters, around 3 millimeters, or
So
maybe
1/8 inch
Yes.
or 16 inch,
A 16 inch.
I think.
16th would be half of
No,
that.
that's
It'd be
16 inch.
less
Yeah,
than
it's 8.
Yeah, so Jan, where was that specific area of the board when it was cut? Was it on a far bottom, top, left, right edge, maybe in a bottom corner or top corner?
No, this was really in the middle. That's why I'm really struggling why it's happened like that, or more to the bottom. Normally, I got the best results at the bottom of the frame.
It almost looks like your sled is
tilting.
sticking. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It cuts so
Yeah.
far, your sled might do a little jump every now and then.
Yeah.
I would check the bottom of your sled to make sure you don't have any screws or anything protruding out from there. And
Okay.
just for the heck of it, it might help you out. Take some Johnson's paste wax and wipe it on the bottom of your boards. It makes that board really slick, so it doesn't catch on any
Okay.
fibers or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Can you
Yeah,
zoom
and-
back into one of those really like go up close again to one of those pieces? Or one of the dog legs?
Yeah, can you zoom in on that?
Sorry, I didn't understand. Could you repeat, please?
Could
To
you
just
get
zoom
back
in
up
on one of the
close
cuts
again?
that are messed up. Oh, sorry. Lauren.
No, I don't get it. Sorry, that was interruption.
Zoom
repeat,
in
please?
on that
Closer.
cut that you showed us earlier, Yan. It had bad.
Yeah,
this
that
one?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, get closer. Zoom up. It means get closer. Here we go.
Yeah. See, it looks
I
like the
thought for a minute
board.
maybe the sled didn't have a good skirt. And because I thought it
No.
was at an angle, but I can't tell if the sled tilted a little bit, because I've had that problem. Is it started to tilt off, and so it didn't cut all the way close. That looks pretty straight up and down.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
edges are straight. It looks like I said, maybe the sled was jumping a little bit, or
Mhm.
it's not that the sled is jumping like, in the air. It's not jumping like this, but I mean, it would cut and then it jumps, or it moves another area and then it cuts. And it's funny that it's only in certain ones and not all of them. Because
if you look-
you have some that are really good and then some that don't look so well. So yeah, it's the same thing with all of those, and it looks like a specific area on your wasteboard.
Mhm.
What software did you design that in?
I think he does his in Fusion, if I'm not mistaken.
And Fusion 360.
I would check on that software too.
Pardon?
I can't remember where I read the other day. Somebody was designing things like this in Fusion 360, and the translation to the software was giving them some issues. Or just do a test in Easel or in Carbide Create and see if you get the exact same results.
Okay.
Because I know I've had some distinct differences between running Carbide Create and Easel, just between those two softwares, how the code translates to the machine and how the machine then runs.
Yeah, and you can
I would
also
just
use
do a
some
test.
foam. Those foam
Yes.
boards, right?
Yeah, you can do the dollar boards from like Dollar Tree, and it's a cheap way to do testing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the equivalent that would be, but yeah, like a really cheap material to find something really cheap.
Yeah, but
I
I
think
find it interesting that it's only happening on one area
Side.
of his entire cut piece.
Like one side on the right side, or wherever that side was.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if that was on the far right of your spoil board. Was it at the far areas? But then if you take those parts right there are all put together. So if you unclip those parts from each other, there isn't a whole lot of stability on that bottom area where you were cutting. You're cutting really close to the edge of your board. Maybe there was something going on with your skirt that you would put around it. Maybe it was hooking on the skirt or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, like maybe making sure it's clamped down there on the edge. That could be something, because then as the bit's spinning, it might be just moving a tiny bit, and then that little
Mhm.
vibration
Okay.
could be causing it too.
Okay.
Um,
Therefore, I have a question. Did you think about, or did you some trials to implement some? I don't know the English word. Maybe I explain it with rubber bands. I don't know, expander. You know what I mean? To put it to the sled, from the sled to the bottom, some rubber band. The sled is always near to the workpiece.
oh, to hold it down, you mean?
Yes. You're doing some trials with that, or?
So, yes.
I did. I tried using rubber bicycle tubes. I just took bicycle tubes and I cut them, And I put an eyelet on the back of the bottom of one of the sleds and eyelets on the two bottom corners farther out onto my skirts. And yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work at all bad.
Yeah.
It didn't.
And
Yeah.
didn't work the way you wanted it to
Okay.
work.
No,
Yeah,
not
it
even
happens.
close.
Okay.
Not even close. No.
Well, there's like, I thought about doing something like that. The problem is like you're counting on like not having too much friction, but having enough that it works. It's kind of a weird,
Like pulling it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a weird animal. Because I was thinking about like actually as we get towards the future M2, because running a gantry CNC versus the MakerMade, one of the interesting things is the sled, without you realizing, does have a slight advantage. Like regardless of if you have a slight imperfection in your plywood or a slight bow, the sled stays in the same position, right? So it's constantly running along the surface of the wood, keeping the depth somewhat close. But if you have any imperfection in a gantry machine and that board is not laid exactly flat on your wasteboard, and you're doing any version of a shallow cut, it makes a massive difference. And like in the future ones, if it goes to a more gantry style or a version of that, where it actually would have almost a spring style base pushing away from the gantry into the wood, and then the sled actually runs along. Kind of like if you've seen those videos where the guy does the spring marker, you know what I'm saying? So he puts a marker in his CNC. If you haven't seen them, where he basically attaches a pin system, but it's a spring. It's not locked into position because then the pin will break
So
or
it
things
would
like
move
that.
around. Yeah. The draw.
Yeah, but the pin is actually on a spring, so it can ride along the surface of the wood without catching on anything. And I was thinking like that would be a perfect, like a mini version of a sled that's like super slick on the bottom, but it constantly stays into contact with the piece, so you don't have to worry if the board is slightly imperfect. It can just ride along.
Yeah, and some of those industrial CNC machines too have like suction to really suck the material down flat.
Oh yeah.
And they have like high powered suction to prevent that exact thing.
And that's all well and good, but that costs more than the M2 altogether.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
But
Yeah,
hey,
so-
I got to get
Okay,
going.
thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
Either way.
This is good to see you, Lauren. See you later today.
All right.
And then we got our call for Sign Makers Workshop Q&A session. So if anybody wants to join it, 5 Central Standard. The links are right here in the chat and on our Facebook group. So yeah, we'll see you all in there. And y'all have a good one. And great talking to everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right.
See ya. Good luck, Jan.